I'm going to show you how to make an artist trading card in Photopea. So first off, we are going to go to Chrome and we are going to type in photopea.com. When you get to Photopea, you will have this new project window. Okay, you can either click on new project, or we could also go up to the menu bar in Photopea and go to file, and we could go to new project as well. So either one will work. So they're exactly the same. All right, so first off, we're going to name our project, and we have a workflow that we follow every time. So we're going to always name our project our first name, our last name, the name or abbreviation for the project. In this case, it is the Artist Trading Card Project, so we're going to call it ATC for Artist Trading Card. And then we will put the period number, whatever period you happen to be in, and you will put the version. So I'm going to put V1 for version 1. All right, then we're going to change the size. The standard trading card is 2.5 inches wide by 3.5 inches high. First of all, we have to change the measurement to inches. The width, then, we will make 2.5 for 2.5, and the height will be 3.5. Okay, next, DPI stands for dots per inch, which generally is about printing. It's a little odd that they have dots per inch here. It's also called resolution, or PPI, pixels per inch is usually what we're doing when we're making a digital file. Here they have 72 pixels per inch. That is good for the web. Okay, the quality will look great if you're just showing something on the web at 72 pixels per inch. But we're going to change ours to 300 because we are going to want to have the possibility of printing anything we make in this class out. So when you print, you need 300 pixels per inch. Okay, in this case, the background, we're going to choose white. Okay, so we should have everything set this way, and then you can push create. All right, so we've created our 2.5 by 3.5 300 PPI document. First, we're going to put a color in the background. All right, first we're going to take a look over here. This is the toolbar. When we click on a tool, you'll know that it's selected because it gets dark, and it also comes up here in the options bar. These are the options for whatever tool that we have selected. Right now, also one more thing about the toolbar, if you see a tool that has a little triangle in the bottom right hand corner, or little triangle or arrow, that means there are other tools like it in the same drawer. You click and hold and this little drawer pops out. In order to select that tool, you have to go in and click on it, and then that tool will be on top. Okay, again, once you have a tool selected, you can move your cursor down and hover it over any tool, and it will tell you the name of that tool. Right now, we're actually going to look for the gradient tool because the tool we want is not on top. It's in the same drawer as the gradient tool. So there's the gradient tool. We're going to click and hold and move our cursor down and click on Paint Bucket tool. And then you'll see the icon there. You actually have to click on it in order to select it. Up here you can see you have the Paint Bucket tool selected, and we have all the options for the Paint Bucket tool. In this case, we're going to leave all the options the way they are. In other tools, we will be changing options. So leave the blending mode on normal, the opacity on 100%, the tolerance at 40, and these two will be checked on. All right. Once we have that paint bucket selected and we've checked the options, we're going to go down to the bottom of the toolbar and we're going to select a color. This is the color picker. So we're going to select a color for our background by double clicking on this top patch. Yours might be a different color than mine depending on what you selected last. Double click and you get the color picker window. Okay, over to the right of this big square, you'll see all the colors of the spectrum. Okay, we can slide from red to magenta to blue to cyan to green to yellow and then orange and back to red. Okay, so you can choose any color you like for your background. Something to note, up here in the upper right hand corner, you'll find the most intense version of that color. As you go to the left here, it's as if you're adding white paint. It's also called tinting the color to make it lighter in value until you get all the way to white on the far left. So this is making the color lighter. To make the color darker, you're going to move down, and this is as if you're adding black to the color to shade it, also called shading, okay, until you get to black over here. And then if you go down the middle, you're adding gray, which is changing the intensity of the color. It's making it desaturated. So it's a duller version of the color. And if you go up to the upper right hand corner, we get the most intense version of that color. Okay, so this is called saturation. All right, the brightest color is going to be saturated, and as you desaturate, you add gray. All right, so you can choose whatever version of the color that you would like and then push OK. That color should pop up in the color picker. I'm going a little bit fast this time, so if you need to stop and re-listen and rewind, you can do that. All right, so once we have that selected, again, I have the paint bucket tool selected. Now all I have to do is go over to my document and click, and it fills the whole thing with that color. All right, next. So if you want to change colors at any time, you just go back and you can select a different color, and you can, put that color in, whatever color you like. There we go. Okay. All right. So just so you see here, over here on the right, we have something called the history palette. And it will save the last 30 steps that you have done, and you can go back in history. Now, if I go back to this and I start over, I will lose the steps below. Also, after I have hit 30 steps, you lose the step on the top, and it will keep adding to the bottom. All right, the next step after you put your color in is going over to your folder for the class, whether it's digital photography class, design class, or AP 2D design. You're going to double click on that folder for the class, and you should have made an artist trading card folder. We're going to have a folder for every project. So double click on artist trading card, and here I have a lot of different things that I have created for the artist trading card. You will be selecting a self-portrait that you shot that tells us something about who you are. I'm going to click and hold and drag this over to Photopea to my document. Okay, when I let go, it will load it right into the file. So if you notice here, we have the layers palette. Here we have the background layer, and floating above it we have the self-portrait. For each layer you can turn the layer off and on. It's still there just to kind of see what's underneath. Okay, if I go up to the move tool, which is up here on the top, I can move my picture around. Okay, now let's say I want to make my picture smaller. If I go to edit, I can go to something called free transform and click on that. And then I'll get a bounding box around the photo. Okay. Now here, this allows me, first of all, if I want to make it smaller or bigger, I can do that in this. Now, there's something called keeping the picture proportional. First off, if you simply start changing it, notice how I squish or stretch the picture. Okay, and that's super unprofessional looking. When you're looking at a real object, you don't want it to appear distorted. So I'm going to go up here to the options bar and push the X, which will bring it back to its original state. So I'm going to go to edit and free transform again. And then in order to keep it proportional, you have to go to the keyboard and hold the shift key down the entire time, and then you have to use one of the little squares at the corners. Do not use the squares that are in the center. When you bring it to one of the squares in the corner, you'll see a double-headed arrow with a straight line on, on a diagonal. And then you bring this down and you can see it's keeping the picture proportional. So bring it down to the size you want. And then when you have it where you want it, you can push the check mark. But I'm going to show you one more thing. So I'm not going to push the check mark just yet. When I take my cursor and I pull it off to the side away from the photo, I get a curved line with a double arrow. When you get that curved line and click and hold, it allows you to turn the image around, angle it, do whatever you want there. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to move it into place. And when I'm happy with the placement, I'm going to push the check mark. Okay, next we're going to add the text, okay, or the type. So we're going over to the toolbar and we are looking for the T, the letter T for the type tool. Click on that. Okay, when we click on that, we're going to get the type options up here. You can see here's the name of the tool. With the type tool, we have the option of choosing what letter style. Also, they're called fonts, F-O-N-T. So you can see here, load font. On the right, you can see a preview of what the font looks like. On the left is the name of the font. In case you really like a font, you can remember the name and go back to it. Okay, so I'm going to go down to, now you want to choose a font that's going to stand out. When you're working with a solid background, it's a little easier to read most of the fonts, okay? But if you're working with a textured background, you might want to choose a bolder and simpler font. So, for example, this is a thinner font. You can see the line is very thin. This one that's called Able. And then there's one here called Acknowledgement that's very thick and solid and easy to read. So you can consider that when you're making your selection. I'm going to choose this one called Aclonica. There we go. So that I've chosen my font. If the font has an italic or bold version, this little drop down here will show you that. Next, you're going to choose the font size. I'm going to tell you to use this slider to bring it up to about 80. We can change that later because different fonts are different sizes. Some of them are just inherently a little bit bigger than others. Next, you're going to choose the color for the font. So you double click on the color picker and you're going to choose something that's going to, again, stand out against your background. So of course, black would definitely stand out because this is a light color. White might stand out, but it also might blend in. If you want to choose a color, choosing a color that's very different from the color that you have is a good idea. So the opposite, this is kind of a blue color. The opposite of blue is orange on the color wheel. This is called the complementary color. Now I don't want to get something too much brighter since I chose a lighter version. So I'm going to choose a lighter version of orange and push OK, and we'll see if how that works. Okay, so we also have other options here. Left justify if we have more than one line. Left justify will line up all the lines on the far left, and then you'll have a jagged line on the right. Center justify centers all the lines, so you have jagged on both sides, but they're all centered one on top of the other. And right justify will make it all line up on the right, and the left will be jagged. Okay, we can choose sharp on this one here, and we'll talk about the warp in a second. Once you have all your options selected, you can click and drag and get yourself a text box. And then click in the text box and you can start to type. Okay, once you've typed it, again you can go back in and you can highlight it if you want to change it. So if I want to, for example, make it a little bigger, I can use the slider to make it bigger. If I wanted to change the color, I could. Maybe I'm going to make it a little more intense and push OK. And then I'm going to push the check mark so I can see what it looks like. I'm selecting the Move tool. I can move it down over here. All right. Okay, so that's the text layer. Now I'm going to show you how to use something called a layer style. So let's say I want my lettering to stand out even more. So first of all, we're going to go over to our layers. Again, I can turn the eyeballs off and on to turn a layer off, to see what's underneath. But I'm going to go to my text layer and select it. Okay, to find the layer styles, you're going to click over here on the far right of the layer. When I click here on the icon, it opens it up for editing. When I click here, it opens up the name of the layer, okay, which I don't want to change. But if I click over here on the far right, I'm going to get the layer style window. Okay, in the layer style window, there are all these different styles to try out. We're only going to try 2 of them today. So if you click on the word itself, it will select that layer style and then also bring up the options. Okay, so if I move this over, you can see it's outlined. Stroke is an outline around whatever it is that is on that layer. So if I choose a stroke when I have the picture layer selected, it will add an outline around the picture. All right, so the options here are the size of the outline. Okay, going to keep it fairly small so that it just kind of helps make it a little more readable. You can position the outline on the inside, in the center, or on the outside. I'm going to leave it on the outside. The blending mode we're going to leave with normal. The opacity of the outline, if you bring it down, it will make the color see-through, so it kind of blends with the background color, which kind of is a nice effect. If I was going to leave that red, I would definitely bring that down. The fill type we're going to leave on color. And then we have a color picker here as well, so we can double click and choose a color that we think is going to look good and make it stand out. So maybe I'll go with a blue, green. There we go. That's a little darker. Make it a little more blue. Okay. All right, when I have it the way I want it, I push OK, and I can push OK on the layer styles. All right, the next thing we're going to do is add a layer style to our picture layer. Double click on the right, and you'll get your layer styles. Okay, and here we're going to add a drop shadow. So again, click on the word itself, and you can see that it added what's called a drop shadow. It's as if there is a light shining on it, and it casts a shadow because it's floating above the background. Okay, here we have the options for the drop shadow. We're going to leave the blending mode on multiply. The opacity is how see-through the layer is. So if we move it to the right to 100% opacity, you cannot see through the shadow. It's very black and very high contrast, as if you're using a very bright light. As we bring it down, you can start to see the color through the shadow, and that's like a softer light. Here we can change the angle of where the light is coming from. So we can see this little blue dot is where the light is coming from, so the shadow is cast, this way. When the light is over here on the right, the shadow is cast over on the left. Okay, so I'm going to move it around, see what looks good for my composition. All right, if you, for example, I could later on add a drop shadow to the letters too. You want to make sure that you have use global angle checked on, so that if you add a drop shadow to anything in the picture, it's going to have the same light source. So it looks like it's existing in the same scene. It would look really weird if the shadow on one was going one way and the shadow on the other is going another way. You can change the distance of the shadow so it looks like the object is further away from the background. The spread makes it very crisp at the edges or softer at the edges. The size makes it more diffused. or less diffused and crisper. Okay, that you can play around with the contour layer if you want to. I'm going to leave it the way it is right now. And the digital noise, if you add digital noise, it adds little dots instead of kind of a gradient or a gradual value. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there and push OK. All right, so now this is the simplest version of my trading card that I could possibly do. I can also add other words that describe me by adding a new text layer if I wanted to. But now you guys know how to add a text layer. So if I click and add another one, I could, just type in whatever word, teacher. Well, right now I have that blue color selected. No, I don't. I have that. Let's see. I think it's just that I don't have this opened up. There you go. So you could type in other words if you want to. Remember that you have to have a layer selected in order to move it around. So if I'm trying to move my name around, but I have teacher selected, it's only going to move the teacher layer around. I have to move to the correct layer in order to move the object or the lettering. Okay. All right, so if I am finished, you can add more words if you want to. You can experiment with adding drop shadows and outlines and other things around any of the letters. All right, next we have to save our file. So we're going to go up to the menu bar. Make sure you're on the menu bar from Photopea and not the menu bar at the very top from your computer. So we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to Save As. We're first going to try to save it as a PSD. A PSD is a Photoshop document. When we get back to school, like in-person school, we will be using Photoshop, which is very similar to Photopea. It's almost exactly the same. So a PSD is a file that saves all of the layers that you have created over here on the right. Okay. So if I save it as a PSD, I've already named it at the beginning, so I save it as a PSD and I drag it over to my desktop, and then later on I can drag it into my folder. Okay, but now if I were to close this up and reopen it, I could still go back in and edit the text. I could delete one of the photos and put a different photo in. I can change anything that is here on these layers. Okay, now the only problem with a PSD is it's a very large file. It's got a lot of information in it. So in order to upload the image to the web, we need to have a smaller compressed file. So we're going to also save it. We're going to do an export. We're going to export as JPEG. A JPEG, JPG for short, is a JPEG is a compressed file. So it flattens all the layers out. So when I save it as a JPEG and I reopen it, I will not have access to changing all these layers. It will just be as it is. Okay, so here we can see that we get the JPEG window. We can change this to inches just to make sure it's the size we wanted. It most likely would be, the quality is going to be 100%, and we can attach the metadata. The metadata is going to be information about when you made the file and what program it was made in. Push save, and then you drag it onto the desktop. Even though these two files are named the same thing, since they're different file formats, they can both exist on your desktop. All right, so that is one. I've asked you to do 3 versions. I'm going to show you 2 other ways of creating different backgrounds. You already know how to change the text. You know how to add type. You know how to change the picture. If I wanted to delete this picture and add another one, all I would have to do is click on it, drag it down to this little trash can, and then it goes away. Okay, and I could add a different photo in. I actually don't think I have a different photo in my file, so I'm just gonna add the same one back in. I could also, instead of adding it again, I can go back to history before I did delete. Okay, all right, first off, we're going to go over to the layers palette we're going to change this up and save it as something else so that you have a second version. So we're going to turn the little eyeballs off on the text layers and on the picture layer, and we're going to concentrate on the background. Make sure you select the background because we're going to change the background. In order to change a layer, you have to have it selected. Next, we're going to go to our toolbar. Last time we used the paint bucket tool to change the color. I want you to go to the paint bucket tool, click and hold to open the drawer, and this time we're going back to the gradient tool. Okay, up here at the top you'll see the options for the gradient tool. The gradient tool allows you to create a gradient is something that fades from one thing into another. Okay, so we're going to click not on the drop down. These are some preset gradients, but we're going to make a custom one. So we click on the color patches itself and you'll get the gradient editor. Okay, with the gradient editor you're going to see this is our gradient going from light blue to black, so it fades from one thing to the other. To change, these are called color stops. To change those, we're going to double click and it will call up the color picker. Okay, so we can change to a different color, and if you like the color, push OK. We're going to then go over to the other side and double click. Make sure you slide it over to the right when you click. We don't want it to, oops, where's the color picker? It's being difficult. Sometimes it does this. Let me try this. Again, I don't want the slider to come out of the corner. There we go. Okay, so now that I have that one selected, I can choose a different color. So let's say I'm going to choose something like that. There we go. Maybe a darker. There we go. Okay. All right. And then I can push OK. All right. Up here we can see various options for the gradient tool. There are different kinds of gradients. We're going to start with the linear gradient. We want the blending mode to stay on normal, the opacity at 100%. These two can be unchecked. So if you click with your cursor at the top and hold down the mouse and drag to the bottom and then let go, you can see it adds the gradient in. If I can do it from the opposite way so that the colors are reversed. I can do it from the side, and I can do it diagonally. I can do it short and longer. You can decide how you want the gradient to be. Okay, I think I'm going to go with this so it kind of looks like a sunset or sun. Yeah, that's good. All right, so you can either drag in a new picture, or I'm just going to turn on my other, things. And then I can change I can re-edit to get a good color. So let's say I want to change the color of this text right here. I double click over here on the text tool icon, and I am going to select the color picker. Now here's a really cool thing. If you take your cursor while the color picker is open and you click anywhere on the photo. So for example, I'm trying to click on the color of my lips. You can see this kind of dark pinkish color comes up. Okay. If I click over here on the gradient, I can choose various colors from the gradient. So I'm going to go all the way down and pick that intense blue-green. All right. And so now my text color is going to match that. So that's kind of nice, picking up that color again. And down with the teacher, I'm going to do the same thing, but this time on the color picker, I'm going to choose the opposite color there. There we go. All right. Now, one thing I didn't show you last time is the text warp. So I'm going to double click on the T here and go to the options bar. There is, at the very end of the options bar, there's a text warp. Okay. First off, you have to choose the style. We can choose arc. Now, okay, so I can arc it one way or the other. It's too big, so I'd have to make to arc it this way, I'd have to make the font size a little bit smaller, but I can arc it this way. Okay, you can also, if I put this to 0 again, It allows you to angle it this way or this way for horizontal distortion. And you can also angle it this way or this way for vertical distortion. Okay, there are other, I can put this back to 0. There are other styles such as the flag wave. You can experiment with the various styles yourself, but the flag wave kind of looks like that, like it's, you know, a wave pattern. Okay, push OK, push the check mark, and there we go. Okay, so you can experiment adding other things at this point, but I'm going to save this one as my second one, save as PSD. Now, unfortunately, Photopea doesn't give me the option to rename it. So I'm gonna, when I save my PSD, if I click and drag it onto the desktop, it's gonna give me this little message asking me if I want to, since it's the same name as another file that I've already put on the desktop, either I have to keep both, which is what I'm gonna select, or I stop or I replace it. Do not push replace, because you're going to get rid of the first one that you did. If you push keep both, it will be called, you know, the same thing as your other one, but it will add copy to the end. Now I can go back in and rename this and kind of open it up. I'm going to make it to highlight and make it into version 2. And then it's renamed, and I'll put it in my folder later. Remember that I also want to save it, export it as a JPEG, JPG. It's already set because of the last time. So it's 100% quality, attached metadata, push save. The same thing is going to happen when I drag it on. I'm going to keep both, and then I will rename the JPEG into version 2. Okay, one last way that I showed everybody how to do. I had asked all of you to create some abstract photographs as well. So this time I'm going to go into my artist trading card folder and look for one of my abstracts. I'll click on it and drag it in, and it's going to load it up. Now you can see it is on top of everything else. Okay, but I'm going to show you how to put it below everything in just a second. Now, when I bring it in, it has the bounding box. It's automatically in free transform. Since this is not a realistic object or thing or person, it's abstract. Nobody's going to know if I stretch it a little. It's not going to show. So I'm going to stretch it a little to make it fill the entire background, and then push my check mark. Okay, now we're going to go to our layers palette. The layer that is on top is going to appear on top in the photograph. So if I click and drag it below this, you can see now the name is on top. Then we can see the teacher, and if I drag it below the photo, now everything else is above it. I'm completely covering up that background, which is fine. All right, so now I might need to change the color to match this particular, version. Maybe I want to use this kind of light purple. Maybe I'm going to make it a little lighter. Push OK. Push the check mark. That's pretty nice. And then I'm changing the teacher color. Or I might, take the teacher out and put something else in. Maybe I'll change it to photographer. I'm going to highlight it to change the color as well. Maybe I'll pick the bluish color there, blue-gray. Push OK, push the check mark, get my move tool, move it over. Probably need to add a layer style, so I'm going to add an outline so it stands out a little bit more. Okay. All right, so that's my third version. Again, I'm going to save it as a PSD, drag it onto the desktop, keep both, change the name to version 3. Okay, and save it as export as JPEG, JPG. Keep both, drag it onto the desktop, keep both, and rename it as version 3. Okay. All right, now the last step is that you're going to turn it in by, so here we can just kind of close this up. I'm going to go to my digital photo class, artist trading cards, and I'm going to put my versions in, put all of these into the folder. Make sure I didn't have any, add some over here. There we go. If I want to clean this up, I can go to, I click on the folder, I can go to view, I can go clean up by name, so it puts them in, alphabetical order. All right, next we're going to teams. We're going to go to your class period, whatever that is. You're going to go to Padlet links. Okay, scroll up until you see the Padlet link for the artist trading card. Click on it. And then you're going to find your name. Now I have already uploaded some other versions that I created. I'm going to look for somebody who has not yet turned theirs in. Jessica, I apologize. I will delete these later. So I'm going to add by clicking on the plus and then going to the little upload. I go to pick a file and I'm going to select one of the ones. Make sure you're selecting the JPEG. The PSD will actually open, but I won't see the whole thing, and I'll have to download it in order to see the entire file. And I don't want to have to do that. So please upload the JPEG. So there's one. I'm going to add the second one. Go to pick file. Okay, make sure I'm uploading the JPEG, JPG. And add the third one. I have to scroll up here, go to the upload, pick a file. And my third one was this one, JPEG. There we go. All right, there we go. So that is it. Make sure you let me know when you've uploaded them if they are late. All right, make sure, so please let me know if you have questions. Remember, you can go through this, stop and rewind and try it out yourself and get your work done. Thanks. Bye-bye.